With all of eBay's new changes, the searches have changed as well. We're going to look at those and point out some things that need to be addressed. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to talk about searches and some issues and some things that you need to fill in and address as quickly as possible. Now, we reached out to a few families, some friends as well, and had people do some random searches, all of them to do the very same searches on eBay for some very specific items, to see what the results were, to see how hard it was to find what they were looking for. So we're going to look at that right now. I'm going to show you some things that you should do that eBay isn't even remotely recommending at this point. They have removed some very key information from a whole bunch of listings with some of the ones that they've actually changed all the category information on and added the item specifics. So let's hop over now. So I asked everybody to look up rhinestone pin. I wanted them just to use those two words and see what happens if they can find vintage pins specifically. The first thing that everybody notices is when you look at it here, we're on the all categories search right now. It brings up jewelry and watches first. You can scan through and see all of these. This appears to be all of the categories in jewelry and watches. This is it. So if you end up clicking on one of these, you're going to be locked into that specific spot. Big problem with that is when you click on just jewelry and watches, you're going to see something different here. So jewelry and watches. There's a whole bunch of different other categories unrelated partially to what we just saw. So what happens when you click on those? You're blocked out from other searches because you've narrowed it down before you got to all the categories that they offer in the first place. One that I thought was weird, and most other folks did as well, there's one section that just says men's jewelry. So that assumes that everything else is just for women. I mean, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean, but it seems like an odd area to put something like that. Because men's jewelry might fall into vintage and antique jewelry as well. And again, once you click on that, you're kind of locked into those subcategories. So there's too much space to look through right off the bat was the biggest complaint. It's hard to narrow it down without eliminating things that you might actually want. So when you go into, say here, the men's categories section is totally gone. So if you're selling a vintage and antique, you think, hey, eBay's telling me I should list it in vintage and antique jewelry, and it's just tied to a man, you may not want to look through 97,000 listings that don't specifically say for men in the title. So this comes into play on why you want to go to the department item specific and select that you have a men's item as well. So you can kind of get some cross interest from it if it's something that's going to go to a guy. I say that only because everybody got frustrated by how much stuff they had to look through to find something very specific. Now, a large chunk of these would be for women from what I could see. Most men wouldn't wear most of these pins at all. So again, it doesn't mean, though, that there aren't other items in here. Now, the folks that I asked to help me to do this exact search here were not resellers. They're not resellers, again, because I think the biggest factor here that's going to cause sellers like me and you and whoever else is listening to this, the biggest problem is how you have to search. Now, as a buyer, let's say I'm just looking through here and I scan through here, and then I see names of nice jewelry that I may be interested in. You may be prone to click on that these days. It's hard to say, but obviously these all steer the buyer, the potential buyer, to a specific direction. And if you don't have some of this information tied into your listing, you may not be picked for certain searches because the buyer is only looking for something specific this way. They may have forced the buyer to stop being a window shopper and just randomly looking for stuff and narrow it down more specifically. I hear every single day from dozens and dozens and dozens of people that sales are down. My sales are down. Right now, my sales are probably the worst I could ever say I've seen in a week. God, it's been years since I've had a week this bad. Couple weeks this bad because of the tanking in sales, what happened on the 12th of October when eBay instigated this new change on everyone's account who sells these items. Now, another thing here too, if you're not at least putting something in here, like putting unknown for certain things. Obviously, a large number may be unknown, but if you're just throwing something out there, it may not be looked through again because people may, again, just want something very specific. But what I did notice is there wasn't a spot for gold filled. I believe all 19 of the gold filled that show up in this section here are ones that I personally typed in. I know I typed in a whole bunch of them. There's some others that have typed in some as well. There's a ton of different materials now you have to look through as a buyer. So it's going to be hard to say what's going to be able to be found. If a buyer clicks on a specific section, it automatically could eliminate your item because you don't have very specific item specifics stated in your listing. So one of the most important ones that I would say, and we can see a difference here, are the pre-owned. eBay, when they actually changed it, removed whether it was pre-owned or new in all of our jewelry listings. So right now ours does not show if it's new, if it's old, or what. Like this one here. This one doesn't say if it's pre-owned or new, because that setting was removed when eBay switched these over. I don't see any way. And again, here's another one. There's a whole bunch of them here. So if you look at condition, how is a buyer going to eliminate the new junk that's flooding categories now because of this? You would have to use the condition. Most all the vintage is going to be used. Out of this section, there's almost 100,000 items in this category. And again, we're looking at jewelry here. Used-wise, there's only about 9,500. 87,000 of all of the listings up in this category, in this spot. Again, we'll go back up and show you here. There's only 97,000 we're looking at in the vintage and antique jewelry here. Just vintage and antique. Again, there's more if you just search through a different way. But when someone wants to narrow these down, you're going to have to use some way to better show yourself off opposed to new and used. Now, this category may be a little deceptive because we're in a vintage one, but there's still 600-700 maybe or more items that are new listed in the vintage category. Maybe it's eBay's fault. I don't know. But most of them do not say. I think that's a huge thing that everybody should go in and make sure that their listings are addressed. Now, this is not a required item specific in any of my listings. Nowhere does eBay tell me that I should put those in that I can see. Now, even our items now, even though I did all of the required item specifics for all the jewelry, we spent the time and did hundreds of them, I'm still mostly in the not specified. So right here is one of my items in the jewelry category. Here it is on eBay just with the search of that item. It does not say whether it's used or not. Even this item from someone else doesn't say that as well. Here's another one of my items, just happens to show up here as well. It doesn't say new or used either. That's a big thing to me because pre-owned means vintage. So let's just look at that same listing that I just showed you there. So what eBay has done is removed the condition statement that I already had into my listing. So now every single one of the jewelry listings that you have needs to be addressed with condition. You cannot just go in and fill in the item specific. Now, obviously, there's probably a better option just to select the ones that you need and edit them in bulk on the listing page in your hub. What you really need to do is make sure it's pre-owned, in my opinion. You need to put that in there. That's huge and important in my personal opinion. You can put vintage original up here. If you're in here, it's just going to take a second. Type it up once, highlight it over, Control-C, and then Control-V for cut and paste. You can see it's the same item here. It's right up at the top of the page here. And that's really the most important one. It doesn't have to be branded or not. That's not a huge ordeal in my opinion. I don't know the metal. So a lot of these are just going to say, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to hurt us later on. Same with stones and base metal and all the rest of these in here. Now, there is a section here that's going to be important in my opinion, whether it's antique or not. Make sure that you put, yes, it's antique. Yes, it's vintage. I know it's double duty. Yes, it's original. You want all of those in there, in my opinion, from looking over searches and actually looking at these specific types of items here. These are all key important information because depending on how they search, you may not show up if they're trying to just find antique, vintage, and original items. They don't want reproductions. They don't want ones that state they're vintage and they're not really, or antique and they're not really. So So these are all things that you need to make sure you fill in. That would be my best recommendation. In fact, let's just go down here. And you'll see in just a second here that this is now going to say pre-owned, or it should. This is the listing. It does not say that. Let's make sure it's uploaded and ready to roll here. eBay's been running slow on our end. I don't know about you, but let's see if it adds it in. So as you can see right here, it shows now pre-owned on my listing right there next to the date. So that's why I say always put the date in there as well. I've always put the date. You can see mine right off the bat. This one just says vintage. They're not dating it. So mine are going to show off if somebody wants something vintage. Again, that's why I say it's harder now than ever before. Here's another one of mine, actually. As I said, it's harder now than ever before to find vintage items compared to how you could in the past. Even in a vintage section, they're still flooding them in. So if you've got the pre-owned, again, this one hasn't been updated yet. I need to add pre-owned to all of my listings. Now let's do one more search here. Let's do Christmas rhinestone pin. That's all we're going to look up here, just on a random eBay search. Now, one more important thing on this too is what category you list your items in. Now, we personally won't pay for listing in 2 categories, but there may be something built into here to kind of force us to, in my opinion. eBay automatically gives us the jewelry and watch category as the result for our search right here. So they've already steered us only into the jewelry and watch section. We're looking for a Christmas pin. Where else might you think a Christmas pin is going to be located? Now, I just opened up the same search in collectibles. So you've got to kind of weigh your options when you list something. What's going to be the best category to list those items in as well? You can't go in Terapeak anymore and look because eBay changed the search results. So if you're looking at search results in these categories in Terapeak prior to a certain date, you can't at least use the specific category anymore, in my opinion, because the search results are totally skewed now because of the way they're forcing into categories and things like that. The price structure is fine. Use the prices on Terapeak, but be cautious on where you're listing the item nowadays. They are trying to force, in my opinion, how they steer it, you to list your items in a specific category only and nowhere else. That's what it looks like they're trying to get us to do. If you look here, 1,725 Christmas rhinestone pins are in the collectibles section. Again, decorative holiday items, things like that. There's 18,874 pins in the jewelry and watch section that match that same criteria. So basically 10% isn't showing up in this section at all, unless you list them in 2 categories. If I'm going to determine which category to list this, and I know I'm showing jewelry now, but this goes for any of the searches that we tried, and I tried them in pretty much all the categories that eBay's been messing around: pottery, paper, photos, and all that sort of thing. They're all working this very same way. So you've got to be extremely cautious on listing them, say, in the Christmas section versus the, in fact, let's sort them all this way, and let's just see. Let's sort them from highest to lowest, highest first. So we've got $969, $1,299, different style items, so it's hard to say. They drop off real quickly there. I bet you they stay up higher here. So if I'm looking at this correctly, I don't know why there's, $450 shipping. I don't know why somebody would even do it that way. That's ridiculous, but I think that's probably a mistake. But anyway, if you look through here, the higher prices seem to be coming from the pin section in general, even for Christmas items, even though I do list things in the Christmas section specifically. So keep that thought in mind too. Be cautious on where the search result steers you. So as a buyer, I'm pushing the jewelry and watches. If you're looking at Terapeak, most of them may have sold differently because the search results were done differently before. So it may say, or even when you're listing the item, may tell you to list it in, the Christmas section versus this section, or this section versus the Christmas section. You're going to have to compare them, what's up, what the prices are, even live ones right now, to determine what's going on. It's going to take at least 3 good months to figure out, or more, to figure out how the search results will affect which category you should be listing your items in going forward. I know eBay always wants you to use the one that they suggest, but in many cases, the one they suggest, just like the item specifics, aren't the correct one based on what a collector looks for. So there again, controlling doing this, you got to be careful. Fill in those spots, though, in item specifics for any vintage items that you have, because, again, you want to make sure that if you are vintage, you can be separated very quickly by the click of a button from all the new junk flooding in. They're not usually putting in all of those items specifics with vintage, collectible, antique, original. They can't do it without getting the risk of getting booted from doing that, from misleading customers. So anyway, that's what I have for you. Well, there we have it. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
Cookie? Nice, Mommy. Let's talk and talk and talk.
This is Mattel's family of Chatty dolls. Chatty Cathy, Chatty Baby, Tiny Chatty Baby and Tiny Chatty Brother. And this is Mattel's Charmin' Chatty. She's different because she has a different personality for each of the 5 records you can change. So she can say over 100 things.
The amo means I love you.
Mattel's wonderful Chatty dolls. Which one do you want? You can tell they're Mattel. They're swell.